with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, welcome to the special village board meeting. Make a motion to open up the public hearing, to continue the public hearing on the budget of 2018-2019.
I'll note for the record that it's 7:04. You know, it was called for at 7, so.
I'll make a motion that we open the continuation of the public hearing on the budget.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak?
You want to go first?
You can start, Paul, go ahead. You may hit things I don't have to go into.
Paul Gerard, 2 Cross Street. I just got an update. Is there anybody that could just quickly kind of summarize what changed?
Sure. I can do that.
Good.
Okay. All right, so basically, the changes that were discussed between the board members and department heads over the past few weeks that resulted in the following. There are certain changes to personal services, that's the salaries and wages. There are actually some increases in those areas because they're reflecting either negotiated agreements with the unions and that sort of, or longevities that they're entitled to. The police department was reduced in personal services by $50,000. That's essentially overtime. It was a significant increase in the request, and we talked to the police chief about that. The fire department decreased its equipment request by about $3,000. The street maintenance area decreased their request for contractual costs by about $51,000. And snow removal by $6,000. The parking department, $27,130 in contractual was reduced. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the building that the parking department now works out of in the downtown area is essentially, functions are being moved up here at Village Hall. So while the building is still under lease, there will be a period of time when we are not going to need to run the heat or have other services that we otherwise would use here in the Village Hall. Let's see what else we have.
Mike, how long is that lease still got to go?
It ends in 2019.
Oh, so I don't know the year.
Which month it is. I'm sorry?
April.
April 2019. So,
About a year, yeah.
and the village is working to see if we can
I know.
either have it subleased or lease it earlier. The Firefighter Service Award Program, which is the sort of like pension plan for the firefighters, we got a reduction from of $1,000 in that area. And then in terms of revenues, we had our franchise fee agreement increased that amount by $30,000 based on some recent information, but I believe that the mayor's talked about a change to that. There was an increase in parking department revenues by about $11,000. That's based on a better look at the history of our collections in that area. Those are the only 2 revenue items.
That's where I come up with 41.
$41,000. And those essentially are the changes. Now, a couple of other things you should know. Our original taxable assessed valuation as we prepared this kind of budget through our assessor was $133,744,841. And the most recent reading, which hopefully is the final on it, actually went down $133,588,332. There's a number of properties that came off the rolls, and that resulted in a total reduction of $2.8 million in assessed valuation drop from the previous year. Just to understand that in context, Novartis was $3 million of that.
2%.
Yeah, and so that $3 million, we actually had a small bump up if you didn't have the reduction through Novartis. So what that ends up doing is bringing our tax rate to $81.27 per thousand assessed valuation, and the assessor is going to double check that calculation, make sure it's correct. That brings us down to a tax rate increase of 4.1%. And as far as our tax cap levy, that is going to actually, we're going to be under the levy cap.
What's the cap this year, Mike?
The cap this year, our tax levy limit is $10,937,581. And with this, it comes down to $10,856,780. So we're approximately 81,000 below the cap. Now, once again, I'll let the mayor speak to the issue of the 30,000 on the franchise fee, because we may have to pull that out. In fact, I think.
Yes, I'd like to talk about that and make that recommendation to pull the 30,000 out as a one-time it's not a reoccurring fee, so that would only give us a cushion of $50,000 on a tax cap levy, but still fall within it. And then bring us back to the, I don't know, what would be the calculation for from the 4.1 up?
About a 4.3 or 4.4%.
Right. Since it's not reoccurring, we don't want to be able to put ourselves in a position for next year.
Understanding was it might
But it would still be under the cap.
So
Oh,
you
yes,
net-
definitely.
By
you net
50,000.
increase in revenues down to 11.
Correct.
Okay.
And once again, because that 30,000 was at first believed to be a recurring revenue, and then we found out it was not, it was a one-time revenue.
What is the cap? Is it 2%?
Of the tax cap itself?
Yeah, you said we're under the cap. What is,
Well, the cap, and that
is
gets
it hard, it's a percent or the hard dollar amount?
Or the rate of inflation, right? 2%.
It's 2% of the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. And right now, this year, it's 2%, according to the state. But they do a number of things in calculating that. And again, it's only on the levy, it's not on the tax rate.
Okay.
So one of the things, for example, we were $160,000 under the cap last year. They only give you credit for $41,000 this year. They don't let you apply the full 160. So, not that that's good or bad, but you know, you do a really good job in a year, and they
And
only
they penalize you.
yeah, they
They
don't
give you a fraction of it.
give you a fraction of it. Now, hopefully, they'll still allow you to carry some of that forward. I'm not sure if they will, but that would help in the future years as well.
And being under the tax cap will allow the resident, if the state issues the rebate, that will allow us to be eligible for the rebate.
Yes, and I would recommend that when we adopt the budget, if this is what we're adopting or close to it, and we're under that cap, we rescind the other
Right.
resolution that we adopted to
Yeah,
exceed
it's
the
all
cap.
due. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So they're allowing you 40,000 credit for last year's overage? I mean underage?
Yes,
Is that what you
yes,
said?
we had approximately 160,000 under, and they're only allowing us to use 40,000, 41,000.
So you'll be like 50,000 under now, a little less.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, just some points I wanted to make. I mean, I'm happy that we took the number down quite a bit. That's encouraging news. You know, I do want to remind the board some of the points I made a couple of meetings ago is that to a lot of residents, whether we have an increase or a flat or you know, this is no longer, you know, for many families with children that own homes, this is, many of them are going to find that this is no longer deductible. So it does, you know, it is, everybody is absorbing an increase, even if we kept everything flat. I mean, it's just the nature of the new tax law. And that's just going to hurt us in the long run because it's going to, you know, it's going to force some people to leave. And the better we can do to keep the taxes down, I think is going to help people stay here. You know, you compound that with the fact that Ramapo continues to put the screws to us every year. As I said before, 62% increase over the last 3 years. You know, I think we have surpluses and we have, you know, contingencies in here that don't need to be here. And I think that would help a lot of people. Mr. Janito and I, we spoke a little bit after the last meeting, and he was telling me that, you know, these contingencies are going to help our cash flow, but, you know, in my experience in finance, you know, we don't raise prices to handle cash flow. We take short-term financing. We open up lines of credit where you can borrow off of that line of credit when your cash flow is poor, and then when your revenue comes in later, you pay it back. You don't increase the price on everybody, which is essentially what we're doing with these contingencies, if that's the rationale for having them. So I can't get there. I'm not going to get there, especially when the last 2 years we've had a surplus of $2 million. So I don't know why we have any increase, but any comment on that for anybody? I probably said it a few times, but nobody says a
We're
word.
keeping the fund balances.
If I may just address the
Sure.
issue, governments are not allowed to borrow, have lines of credit to be used to draw down cash as needed in the event they run short. They have to actually go through a purchase of a note, typically a revenue anticipation note, grant anticipation note, something like that. One of the issues that the village ran into many years ago was they started taking revenue anticipation notes, and that's what ran into one of the most significant, well, that contributed most significantly to the deficit situation we ran into. What ended up happening was we were continually, every year, borrowing in advance against water revenues and sewer revenues, and then later on other revenues that you could go to a bank and get a revenue anticipation note. And the second thing that happens with that is the credit rating agencies, including Moody's, which rates us, looks negatively on that, as does the state comptroller's office. They certainly understand a grant anticipation note where there may be a delay in the money coming in from a grant that you've been awarded and guaranteed, provided that you do the work. And so that is not necessarily a negative, but borrowing against other revenues would be. And yes, Paul, I did talk to you about it the other day. I took a look at the 2016 results. At the end of the year, yes, we had a healthy fund balance, but our cash balance in the general fund was only $315,000. That's not even a payroll. So, you know, if you ran that low at the end of the year, and you had some other significant issues that forced you to run through that cash, you can be right back into that situation that we were in a few years ago. So, as I say, one of the things looking at audited financial reports, you see the difference between what's in a fund balance, which tells you you're healthy in a certain regard, but then you also, we do have to consider the cash flow issue, because June comes around and then we start collecting our cash again, and we do have a little bump in the beginning of June, but really most of the taxes come in at the very end of June, and that's the meat and potatoes of what we do for most of the year. After that, it's really just certain things like franchise fees and sales tax in the county that comes in twice a year. And other than that, our fees and charges that come in throughout the year at varying points.
So how many years of 6- and 7-figure surplus do you think we need to have to get our cash flow?
Well, I'll put it this way. Moody's looks at a fund balance of 20% as being the minimum acceptable level of fund balance. We're not there yet. That's what they look at. If you want that's for like an A1 rating. If you want, assuming other things are equal in terms of health, financial health, because they look at more than just your balance sheet. They look at, well, they look at your debt. They look at things like the wealth of the community, the housing prices, everything else, the per capita income, family incomes, and all that. But if you're looking at just that financial piece of it, a 20% fund balance gets you to pretty much an A1 rating, everything else being equal. If you want to really go for the gold and get a AAA rating, they're looking at 30% at least. How many years? If things work out well, it's a couple more years that we will get to a healthy fund balance. And the one that's going to tell us that pretty much is the rating agency. just as they've done with the county. As you know, the county was in a terrible deficit situation. They had deficit financing, very similar to what we, in fact, before we had it, they had it. And their credit ratings are now starting to go up. If you looked at their balance sheet, you'd say, oh, they did some, and they have a bit more juice than we do in terms of being able to raise revenues, like sales tax and stuff like that, where we have a limitation on that. But anyhow, I would say a couple of years out before I'm really comfortable saying, hey, we're very stable and healthy. But again, the rating agency would be the one.
Okay, so we're going to keep putting contingencies in here, and that's not what they are. They're designed to...
Oh, no, they're definitely contingencies for the unexpected. And if we don't use them and we get to the end of the year and they go to fund balance, that's a positive for us. In the meantime, which all departments do throughout the year, they do try to keep their expenditures under control. Some things are beyond our control, like the weather that causes us to hit certain things. Our revenues are only as good as, you know, what the public does. So like franchise fees and utility gross receipts tax, that's all great stuff when it comes in, but, you know, on the other hand, you have people taking conservation measures. So if they take conservation measures, they pay less to the utility company, and the utility company pays less to us in utilities gross receipt tax. And franchise fees are all dependent upon what Verizon and Cablevision or Altice do out there. So, again, those are revenues that aren't necessarily, you know, they're what they call elastic revenues. They're going to switch with the economy. Things go very well, we can do much better. So yeah, the contingency, you know, it's for the unexpected, and things do happen that cause us to have to tap into that.
Well, we've been fortunate enough to keep about, I guess this year's numbers probably, you know, over $1 million in contingency the last 3 years. Between all three funds. All right. Okay, I just had some, you know, I had some questions because, you know, you provided me the 2018. So I just had some questions. We had $253,000 in an account called suspense or exchange. You know, any idea what that is? It's not a budgeted item, but there's a $253,000.
That was probably a temporary holding account before it was allocated to another proper expenditure.
Okay. I don't want to repeat anything that you guys had already made a correction to, so just bear with me. Is judgment and claims, that's another thing that's just...
Well, judgment and claims are tax surcharges mainly.
Okay.
And so some years we get hit hard with them. Last year we happened to not get hit too hard. This year, I mean.
Right.
Not yet, at least the year's not over.
Okay, yeah, because I saw it was zero, but budgeting, okay, I got you. Police you addressed, street department you addressed. I'm sorry, I think you took street department's $40,000 out of contractual, but the equipment, what is that for? Is that the new truck that we bought? Or?
No, the equipment, there's two items in there. One is called a trackless machine, which is a multi-purpose machine that's used year-round. It does mowing, it can do, you know, snow removal, those sorts of things.
Okay.
And the other one was prime equipment for the snow removal.
Okay, but those are not in the capital project?
No,
page,
they're not,
separate?
because they're both about $20,000, so it makes 40. Basically, we're now following a policy too, to keep out of the capital any item that's less than $50,000 unless it's combined with a bunch of other items, or like let's say it's a sewer improvement and it's entirely, it's going to be over 50,000.
Okay. So the trucks we were talking about, we purchased it this year. There was another truck that Joe was talking about.
The heavy duty.
Yeah, but the heavy duty is a grant. So we have to wait to be awarded the grant money and then make the purchase, yeah, every difference.
Yeah, the guideline.
Okay.
That's $250,000.
Okay. Under street lighting, where do we see the savings on the smart watt project? Is that supposed to save us some utilities or?
Well, the Smart Watt project, the first year of it, the improvements are paid off by the savings. So then we're going to have, after that first year, we're going to have savings. So the Smart Watt project that was completed in the past year was at the Recreation Center, the George Parness Center. And the Smart Watt in Village Hall was just completed. I don't even think we just got the bill in actually.
A couple of weeks ago.
We just paid it this week. So that's the Village Hall LED lighting and the police department lighting. So there's going to be, the savings are going to occur roughly after about 10 months for that.
Okay,
So we didn't make an adjustment in the, that's in the general fund budget under our shared services. We didn't make an adjustment yet there because we haven't actually seen what the savings is.
okay, so we're not expecting much in fiscal year 2019 tied to this, is that what you're saying? Because the
Correct, because it's about a 10-month, you know, we'd be 8 months into the year before we can.
okay, so we didn't budget the outlay nor the savings. You're saying we just kept it neutral.
Correct.
Right. Okay. The equipment in the curbside solid waste, 35,000.
That's for containers and receptacles replacement. That's staying in there, we're not changing that.
I noticed the contractual costs on there are a lot higher than what we've been running this year in on the solid waste. It's like, actually they're above about 300,000 this year, and budgeted was 250. I wasn't sure why that was running over.
There were some increases in the dumping the landfill fees. And I can get a breakdown of that, see what it is, but yeah.
Okay. Did we, or I don't remember, did we make any changes in the safety inspection revenue or anything like that? Because that's,
No.
is that a concern, because that's way down this year? I noticed that was way down this year. Is that a concern of, or maybe it's come up since?
Are you talking about fees?
Yeah, the revenue tied to safety inspection fees.
On 1560.
So you're talking about this year's budget?
We're talking about this year's run rate.
As opposed
It's
to
pretty
last.
low in revenue, but you're budgeting a similar amount to last year. Is that a concern? I mean, are we not going to collect what we expected there for this year?
No, we still expect to collect what we
Which
should.
comes in late in the year.
It comes later.
Okay. I know the film revenue is unexpected windfall this year in terms of how many films we did, but I don't know if that's expected to continue. It's not something we're budgeting for, we're just hoping for the best on that.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Good, they were turning around. Okay. Culture and rec, no longevity increase on that one. I hear every meeting she does a damn good job.
No, she has a longevity this year. On the original tentative budget, that amount was not included. That's one of those personnel adjustments we made.
Changes.
Okay, and then in the capital, which of the sewer projects are covered by the new bond that we issued?
The new one, the ESC, that was what they referred to as the sewer abatement project, phase 1. And essentially what that was is improvements to the various parts of the treatment plant that were required under the DEC order on consent.
Under sewer, there's, well, I'm sure it's this $4.5 million item, this plug flow mod, is that?
That's
That's
another modification.
That's different?
That's a different modification. The first modification you're talking about is the upgrades and modifications to the conveyance system. And that was the main pipe for relining, cast in line, cast in, so they put the pipe inside the pipe and fill the pipe. And then there's another piece to that where they're doing the whole replacement from Wayne Avenue down Washington. And the other piece was up on
Mayor, if I could just...
Go
I'll go over some
On
of these
here,
capital projects.
on this
exactly.
page, thank you.
So, yeah, under the sewer improvements, the sewer yard piping modifications is to improve the drainage pipes that are there. One of them collapsed recently. And so they were able to get it working again, but that's to replace the lines so that they're 30 or 40 years old. The roof replacement is there because of some roof that needs. So the phase 2 sanitary sewer abatement is the second half. We had borrowed money for the first half of that. Again, it's part of that order on consent. So that's the second half of that project. The automatic fine influence screen, that's to replace a screen that has the influent, which is the sewage coming into the plant. One of the first things it does is start separating the solids so as not to affect the water coming out of it. The water then gets treated separately than solids. The plug flow modification is a design, that's a major redesign and replacement of the current system that's in there now that is outdated and no longer viable as a working system going forward. And that's one of the things that the DEC said you basically have to change that. So that's a major project. That's the sewer system items that are included in the capital. Now, what's going to happen with those people is that what's going to happen with all of those is as they come up to be done, Charles Swicky will, for instance, say that we have to go about now and start the sanitary sewer phase 2. The board would vote on a capital project and have to vote how to finance it. Typically, those are going to be bonded because it's such large amounts and need to be bonded for more than 30 years, actually. We will also attempt to get financing through the Environmental Facilities Corp as we did with the other bond because the rates are just so good compared to anything we could get. And it works very well. So those are the major things and we would go to them for those items.
Okay, so these are all over and above the last bond we just issued for 5.5.
Yes, and they wouldn't all be issued in 1 year, but they have to be issued over time, so make sure you meet the standard.
Okay. And we're showing all of this funded by via bond, via debt.
Right, let me just clarify one quick thing on that too.
Yeah.
As we had with the sewer abatement phase 1, there was, I'm trying to remember the exact dollar amounts, but I think it was around $600,000 for that entire project. We ended up getting a grant to pay down a lot of that, so that the balance we did have to borrow. So originally we were going to borrow the full amount. We ended up getting a grant. We likewise see about $250,000 worth of grant coming in on phase 2. And right now, the state is very heavy on water and wastewater financing our grant programs. And we're right in there for that sort of thing. So.
Okay. On the parking lot improvements, or I guess this is roadway improvement, village facilities and parking lots, 250. We said we're getting CHIPS money for the, I can't remember which line, it's the one across from the post office,
Okay,
right?
yes.
I mean, because none of this says it's funded by CHIPS, that's why it's,
Right, because
That's why
when we
I'm-
actually flesh out the project, then we'll determine how much should be chips and how much should be debt for those projects.
okay. And is any of this roadway improvement money for roads? Because there's some pretty bad ones, you know, like Chestnut or Boulevard there. I mean, when
There's only one roadway.
Mayor Street got paved, that high traffic route.
The streets were identified over the course of a few years, and it was happened to be one of the streets that was identified, but going to Boulevard and going to the disruptions on Boulevard and owing on the gas line, the high-pressure gas main replacement. We should be entering into a cost-sharing agreement where they're going to cost share with us the cost to restore the road instead of just restoring the trench as required. So that's currently under negotiation, and once we're able to do that, I believe that we will repave that whole road, but I believe they now want to make additional disruptions and cross Boulevard again. So I don't think we're going to repave that road in particular until we're sure that their project is complete.
Okay, do we have any monies for roads and side streets? Because
There's about 60,000 in the regular budget for that. It's part of the contractual of the street department.
okay, thank you.
I do this a little differently. I do it by line. The first line is contractual expenses for the Board of Trustees. It's going up about $12,000 over the last year. What's driving the $12,000 increase?
Predominantly legal fees and consulting fees for the board.
So why would it be under them and not under legal?
Well, we basically put the labor council under the legal department and other issues under the board.
Big increase. There's a couple of raises that are pretty hefty. Now, I know the people involved and I know they do an excellent job, but I think it would be beneficial to the taxpayers to try to spread those out over more than 1 year. I think that's something that should take a look at. I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but in lump sum, it's quite a big amount. Police, I took 50,000 out of OT. How are they running this year?
They're running pretty much their limit this year. We are probably going to apply some of the funds that we have from things like filming revenues and events and so forth, which...
The additional revenue that's not in the budget.
Correct.
I'm a proponent for the police department, but they have a lot of part-timers. They can be used to keep the overtime down. I know my son wouldn't like to hear that, but it is what it is. He pays taxes too, just as all of us do. Street administration, I see an increase in personal services of $65.42. What brought that on? As an addition to this change?
That was some longevity increases in accordance with the union contract.
Longevities. Snow removal went up 6,000. How far behind are we this year? Because this was an exceptional year.
It went down 6,000.
Down 6,000.
Yes, you're right, I'm sorry. It decreased from 120. You're absolutely right, to 114. My misread. I noticed some, as you said, Longevities were put in and some small raises were added.
Only longevity.
It was just longevity, there was no increases?
No, there will
For
be
direct
adjustments.
reports, I'm talking about, not for union people. I was under the impression that there was some increases other than longevity.
No, it's whatever was in accordance with the workforce.
There are a few more that I can go through, but, I mean, you made progress. I still think there's probably a little more progress that could be made. You might be, I mean, we only gained 41,000, as you said, and the expenses went up. So really, we kind of treaded water here. I mean, I'm sure time was put in to try to find whatever you found, but in dollars and cents, it's not going to make a big difference. And some of these things should be looked at, even if you can get it down to 3/8, whatever. Every couple of tenths of a percent, because every percent is 109 grand. And you can't really draw enough revenue to change that number. Not with everybody's assessed valuations either staying the same or dropping. Is there any hope for Novartis?
I guess it's as good as mine, no, not yet.
Regardless, when you're doing a budget, obviously, everything I say is subject to Mike agreeing or disagreeing. But when you're doing a budget, you can't assume certain.
Oh, no, I don't want to assume, that's just for the future.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had the experience to do my own budget, because the treasurer had to leave because of things that he'd done. You know, I brought you in to help him, and he didn't learn from an expert, so the next year we had the same problems, and I let him go. It's not a fun game. It certainly isn't, but it's a necessary thing. I mean, things are getting better, but it still hurts when you get a 4 or 5% tax increase. So,
When you get almost $3 million.
well, I understand what happened in
It's
August.
2%, it counts
Yeah,
for 2%.
I said that.
But we still need to fund the fire department, the police department, the DPW,
I'm not
the
saying you don't.
staff, the equipment, the
I never
benefits.
said you shouldn't staff.
I'm not saying, I'm just making it clear that, so the public here
There
knows
is any
what's
fact
involved
there
in
that
trying
you
to
can
fund this budget. And that's what's involved in it. It's just
I
$13
know.
million.
I know you're digging out of a hole. I
And we're
understand that.
digging out the hole, we're building up the fund balances.
And I give you
and this
credit,
is what-
you
this
are
is-
digging out of that hole.
Right, and everyone in this, in the village is cooperating and being helpful to us, such as the police department, the fire department, everyone is pitching in.
Well, I'm not gonna comment. That remains to be seen when you negotiate a contract.
We're not talking about that aspect of it, I'm talking about overall, in general.
The unknown could come up and bite us too.
Well, that's true, too.
Hopefully not.
And they're protected, they're union workers, and that's what it is, absolutely.
Absolutely.
One of our, obviously, the biggest challenges, and everybody's mentioned it, is that significant reduction in assessed valuation, predominantly
From
from
the
the
waters.
waters.
There's many others too.
If we had just held the same level of assessed
You
valuation,
probably wouldn't need a tax increase.
well, it would have been 2%.
2%.
What's the reduction from?
In the waters property.
Oh,
They had, the first year was a $6 million reduction, then they had a $3 million reduction, and they again had a $3 million reduction.
They gave the property away and nothing's happening. That's the sad part. They got those reductions and they grabbed that property and they're gonna sit on it.
We've been working to try to entice people to come here. We've been working with the REDC, we've been working with realtors, we've been working with the owners,
state filming.
You know,
state filming,
it's not in
New York
my
State
hands.
filming. But just to make it clear,
No, I'm
we
not
are
saying.
trying to
I
get
understand.
something done on the property. But, you know, our hands are tied. you know,
It's
we
their
can only do
property.
so
You
much.
can't
It's
make
their
them do
property.
anything.
Exactly.
But I guess we're living with it until somebody decides that there's something that they can put there and make money. But I
Something
really-
appropriate.
Well, under the current zoning.
Exactly.
Under the current, you don't need to change that zone, that's the last thing
Right.
you want to do. Okay. I said my piece.
I just have a question because it was mentioned, so I just want to follow up on it. My employees asked me, so I have to ask. Are any employees getting raises this year?
CSEA unit members?
Any village member, any village employee?
Depending on your term, what is it, you know, like, is it something that's contractual or non-contractual?
I'm asking for both contractual and non.
That's to be seen.
On the contract.
Yeah.
I have a question
Come on
about,
up. State your name and address.
okay, Amy Burks, 71 Washington,
Okay.
Redwood Street. So my question is about employee benefits because I know it's a large area on the graph. So who is covered under the employee benefits? Is it employees, spouse, children?
Well, let's start with what the benefits are. So you have, of course, Social Security is in there, that's the employees. The retirement system, all full-time employees of this village must be a member of the retirement system. Part-time people have the option to join the retirement system, so that's a benefit that they could get. As far as the medical benefits go, they are provided to either individual or family plans as well. So
Is there different rates?
there are different rates.
Depending on the number of people?
Yes, and there are contributions are made by the employees to, by many of the employees to the retirement system. Depends on their union contract and so forth. In fact, we do have a revenue line in there for employee reimbursements.
So is the village paying for the benefits or does the employee pay? Is it subsidized?
It's both. The village pays the major share of it,
Yeah.
and then employees will contribute, depending, like for instance, employees now, and again, it all depends on the contract you're on, that you're under. But a individual plan, the employee contributes 14%. Or, I'm sorry, family plan, they contribute 14%. If they're under an individual plan, they contribute 12%.
Okay, I work in benefits and some companies are saying that spouses who can get coverage from other employment, they can't have it from their company.
Okay, we are under the New York State Health Insurance Plan, and they have rules and regs that we have to comply with. So under that, they do not preclude people from joining or participating even if they have health care coverage elsewhere. So in other words, if a spouse has health care coverage, we cannot tell the employee they cannot have.
Okay, you can't do that. Because I heard that spouses cause a lot of claims, which if you're self-funded or you be covering the claims. The claims are expensive.
Well,
I don't know how they're paid.
usually if there's a, just from my experience, if you and your spouse both have insurance through your own employer, typically your employer is the primary for you, and then the secondary would be your spouse's. So,
Right.
and typically they do something like if your employer says we will pay 80% of the cost, then you can go and apply to your spouse's insurance for the remaining 20%, and depending on their rules. Because I've seen it where an employee works, I have 80%, my spouse has an 80% coverage. But the plans are such that they say it's 80% period. So I can't now go after the spouses because 80% was already covered. Some other places, they have a different situation where they might say, what isn't covered by your insurance, the other person's insurance may cover.
I just didn't know if that was an area where spouses who do have the option to get insurance somewhere else could get off of this plan
We do have that, we have a buyout, I
and
believe, and some
reduce claims
of the contracts, yeah.
charges. That's
They
my
do have that, but
suggestion.
we can't force them off.
Okay.
That's-
And we've actually been increasing the contribution rate in the last round of negotiations with one of the unions. We increased it to 18%.
Okay. Because I know medical insurance is extremely expensive.
Okay.
We know what's going on. All right, thank you.
Like are most employees paying now? It should be pretty much everybody.
Quite a few. I think we bring in almost 150,000 in contributions. 148.
Yeah, because most of the employees that were in the 90s where it started, the contribution, most of them gone.
And the dental coverage is 100% by the employee, no?
The dental is, yes.
Yeah,
We have, yeah, we
It's only
pay
the,
the
it's only the medical, health benefit.
and there's no vision.
And dental is 100% on
Well, actually, I don't believe we have vision for. You don't have it for the.
No,
Just now it's only a dental.
And you gotta pay your own dental.
And the dental, you have to pay, it's just it's a dental savings plan, really, is what it is.
Right. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to speak? Sure, come on.
Do you guys think it's going to get to a point where people just can't afford to live around here anymore? This is an honest question. It's not about the budget, it's just more personal to the board.
That'd be based on an individual decision. That's what I was saying.
Very big answer. I mean, when do you
He's
think
not
with
commenting
all
on the budget.
when do you think that how many more years do you think you have when people are when we might just have foreclosures all over the place because people can't afford their mortgages anymore?
But once again, I believe that's based on a personal decision, personal income.
Do you think that that's a good thing if people can't?
I don't see it going in that direction.
$19,000 for a quarter acre lot in the Village of Suffern is not.
The Village of Suffern tax is not $19,000.
There's nobody in the Village of Suffern with $19,000. That's
Village of Suffern.
Can't combine
what's the
all.
I'm sorry. What's the top? Let me write it down. What's the highest taxable
Resident in the
resident?
Village of Suffern, I don't know. I wouldn't
Do we have
know.
any idea what the?
I don't know, but I would doubt that
Ranges
it's
are-
anything close to $19,000.
Maybe
Unless they-
5,000, maybe.
I know of
Village tax
5,000.
only or
Maybe
total?
5.
No, village tax, the highest that is probably out there.
Yeah, I know there's at least one that I know of that's 5.
5,
Around
maybe.
5 or 6 might be the highest.
Yeah.
Highest. You have to take a look at the school taxes and,
No, I was just saying that, just from your expert opinion in terms of if we're gonna keep the village sustainable.
I would,
that's Jonathan Turco.
We could put some money in the budget for an attorney that's maybe got some expertise in, looking at possibly really becoming a city rather than just doing some token report from West Point. And that would be, that has the potential to be an immense tax relief for this village, for the people in this village.
hold on.
Mike, do you have an estimated impact on the Squires Gage buyout?
I spoke with the assessor about it. He didn't think it was that significant in terms of the overall budget because the assessments themselves
Or that high?
weren't that high. But whatever he had as far as information was included in this.
Okay,
But then again, not all of them have cleared.
no, there's still more to go.
Which, to continue my point, I mean, imagine how much more attractive this village would look if we didn't have to pay Rampo taxes and get almost nothing in return. It's worth looking at.
579 last report.
Well, it's been looked at for 20 years. And there's roadblocks all along the way. You start with the town, go to the state, the county. Nobody wants to give up revenue, so they're gonna fight with tooth and nail. And the
Those
process
things can be
is so...
negotiated.
No, it's
I don't
such a
think we're gonna get
cumbersome
into this whole
process.
debate right now.
Yeah,
so.
that's all right, we can finish this.
Okay, anyone else from the public? No? Okay, so at this time, like, Close the hearing, close the public hearing.
On the tentative budget for 2018-19.
That's what we're here for. Motion,
I'll make a motion.
second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to return.
Frank, you're on
Maura?
fire tonight.
You second the
Second.
motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll be choked up and
Okay,
down.
Turn the table off when you're ready to go.